When I was studying in Asia, I was particularly inspired by a certain Zen master named Seppō. Seppō Zenji, a great Zen master. One of the least talented, hopeless cases in all of Zen. He had no concentration. He had limited discipline. He gave up a lot. A hopeless case. But he was known as the workhorse of Zen, because even though he had all those obstacles, he refused to give up. He was born in Fujian, which is where I eventually went to train. And as a child, even as a little kid, before he could talk, he refused to eat meat. He figured out for himself, apparently, that the meat was coming from the chickens and the pigs. And he didn't want to eat them. He loved them too much. One day, when he was a little older, he was a little boy, he was riding on his mother's back through town, and a death procession came through. And she explained it to him, and when he realized that someone had died, he was absolutely terrified. When he learned later about hell, he became even more terrified, and so at the age of 12, he became a monk. Not fully ordained, of course, but he entered a monastery. And he studied there at the age of 12. He studied ethics, he studied virtue, he studied the scriptures, he studied the doctrine, he studied right view, and he traveled extensively from monastery to monastery. Until finally he was fully ordained, and then he went to train with Master Tozan, the founder of the Soto school. He was a workhorse. He had moved through great learning, and he was not trying the spiritual bypassing route. And that meant that when he went into these monasteries, he always volunteered to be the head cook. Why? Because at that time in those monasteries, the head cook was considered the most difficult position in the monastery. And the reason for that is relatively simple. The head cook had to cook for all of the monks, and there were hundreds of them. There were 500, 600, 700, 800, sometimes 1,000 monks at these monasteries. And he had to cook. I've been at monasteries like that. The kitchens are just incredible. I don't know if any of you have ever cooked for 1,000 people, but it's not anything like cooking for 20. But he always volunteered to be the cook. Why? Because he knew, well, all of you have a chance. All of you can concentrate. You're really good monks, but me, it's better if I just stay in the kitchen. I'll gain merit. I'll gain my ethical virtue. I'll be a good person, and then maybe someday I'll be able to really train like you already can. So you all go and train. I'll be the cook. And sometimes he would cook for all of the monks, and then he'd find a few minutes here and there, and he'd sneak. He was very sneaky. He would sneak to the toilets and clean the toilets too. And he would sneak food and cook his own meals, which was completely against the rules. The head cook can't cook their own meals. It's unethical. And so a lay person who was in charge of the monastery heard about this. He heard, what? The head cook is cooking special meals for himself? Oh no. But it was well known because he cooked it for such a long time. He boiled it and boiled it away. And so the lay person, he came in, the head of the sort of like the executive director of the monastery, came in to investigate. And he found the pot boiling on the stove, and he picked up the lid to see what is he, Seppō, cooking for himself anyway, not giving it to the rest of us. And a terrible stench came out of the pot. Oh, terrible, disgusting, horrid. What is this? And Seppō came in and he said, what are you cooking here? He said, oh, that's my dinner. I guess he didn't have dinner, right, as a monk. That's my lunch. Well, why does it smell so bad? And he said, well, those are all the rotten parts of the vegetables that I wouldn't want anyone else to have to eat, but I don't want to throw anything away because we had to kill things in order to make those vegetables. It's so terrible. So I'll just eat the rotten parts. But I need to cook it for a long time because otherwise it makes me really sick. I just have to boil it and boil it. Doesn't get rid of the taste, but at least it gets rid of the disease. So this is how Seppō trained. Always caring about everyone. So I'll tell you some of the stories about his training and then after his awakening, because you should have a sense of this. So I think a lot of us here are really stuck in our heads and we have the sense that we're going to figure this out someday. So you should have a sense of how this actually works, that this goes beyond knowledge. This is during his training. He as he said, he climbed Mount Tokusan 9 times. He climbed Mount Tozan 6 times. He climbed and climbed. He would go to the place and train and then he'd leave. Sometimes because of he'd give up. Sometimes because the master would send him away. Then he'd climb some other place. He was constantly attempting to find a way to awakening, but it was very hard for him. So at one point, he was at Tozan, and he was the head cook, and so he was separating the sand and the rice. Some of you may know, maybe some of you have experience with this, not just got your rice from the grocery store, but if you know actual rice, that you physically take out of the field, a lot of the time there's sand or little stones in it, which can be very, very bad, as you can chip your teeth with it. And so he was going through all of the rice for 800 monks, I think 700 monks at that monastery, going through all the rice to pick out the little pieces of gravel so that no one would chip their teeth. Little tiny, it's sort of like, a rice size, not really gravel, but sand, maybe? I guess we'll call it sand. But bigger than sand sometimes. So he was doing that, and he'd gone through a lot of rice. I guess we don't have any container in here at all, but maybe a bushel of rice, say. And so, like a big bag of rice, he'd gone through it. And it was in a rice pot. And the master at Tozan came in and said, "Oh, I see you're separating the sand from the rice. Separating the two." He said, "Yes, that's true, I am. I'm the cook, it's my job." He said, "Yes, well, let me ask you a question about that. When you do that, do you separate the sand from the rice? Do you separate the rice from the sand?" And Seppō said, "They are both separated at exactly the same time." And Master Tozan was not impressed. He's a master after all. It's a good answer, isn't it? It's a good answer. It would be good if we had that level of alacrity here. But he's not awakened yet, and Master Tozan sure is. And so Master Tozan doesn't hesitate. And he said, so remember, he said, the rice and the sand are separated exactly the same time. And so Master Tozan said, "Really? Well, in that case, what will the monks eat?" And Seppō needed to answer somehow. And so he dumped over the whole rice pot all over the floor. And so Tozan saw, and he said, you should leave. You should go and train with Master Tokusan, which wasn't a punishment. He wasn't mad at him. He just realized that your personality would be better with that teacher than with me. It's very humble, actually, because this is a great monk. This is someone you want at your monastery. He was the cook. He was good at everything. He was virtuous. This is exactly the person you want. But Master Tozan was selfless, and he knew there's a different master, Master Tokusan. So these are two different people, Tozan and Tokusan. He said, "You should go to Tokusan. It'll be better for you." And eventually he actually became the Dharma heir, under Master Tokusan, not Master Tozan. And he was one of the greatest masters of all time. And so this is the greatest sacrifice a teacher can make. A virtuous, capable, brilliant student. But he knew, best thing for you. So he sent him off. And so Seppō gathered his things, And he was going to the gate with his little bundle of things in his traveling robes. And Master Tozan came out to wish him farewell. So he said, so remember a long time ago when you came here, where did you come from? He said, well, I came from Fuzhou, or a place near Fuzhou, a major city in Fujian. And he said, right, that's right. I think you told me that. And when you came, how did you get here? He said, well, I came through the mountains. I took the mountain path. There's a path that goes through the mountains here. And I took that one. It's very beautiful. He said, ah, yes. And now that you're leaving, what path will you take? How will you get back? And he said, I'm going to take the same path. I'm going to take the same road through the mountains. And Master Tozan said, yes, there's someone who doesn't take the road through the mountains. Do you know that person? And Seppō said, no, I don't know him. And Master Tozan said, and why? Why don't you know him? And Seppō said, because he doesn't have a face. And Master Tozan said, if you don't know him, then how do you know that he doesn't have a face? And Seppō had no reply. He'd been beaten again. And so he left. And he went to Master Tokusan and he trained under him for a long time. And some of the most interesting stories come from that time frame, but it's already 9 o'clock and some of you may be getting tired. So I'll continue. He eventually trained with Tokusan and received transmission, and then went on pilgrimage with Ganto. Now, Ganto was one of his brother disciples, and they were very close. They were very good friends, even though they were, spiritually speaking, opposites. Ganto was a spiritual genius, a complete spiritual genius who achieved complete awakening quickly with virtually no effort. There was no struggle, there was no difficulty. And why? He was actually asked that by Tokusan, by that master. He said, where have you trained to become so stupid? Which is a compliment, obviously. Meaning he's totally empty-minded, completely empty-minded. He's not carrying around all these concepts like we do, all this arbitrary material, irrelevant thinking. So he said, when he first met him, he said, where have you trained to become so idiotic, so mentally worthless? And he answered, for all of my life, I refuse to deceive myself. That's his place of training. And because he had such clarity around that, his training went very quickly. It was easy. He was a spiritual genius, not like Seppō, who was a spiritual dolt, completely incompetent because he thought about stuff so much. So Ganto and Seppō eventually became friends, and they were very close, and they went on pilgrimage together, and one day they were walking through the mountains and through a town, and it started to snow, and it snowed a lot, and so they had to go into an inn, and they went into a little room and had to stay for a few days. And while they were staying there for a few days, Ganto slept. Ganto took a nap for a few days. He got up to eat. He ate big meals, and then he went back to bed. He napped during the daytime. He slept through the night, snoring all the while. And Seppō did not do that. Seppō trained and trained. He sat and he faced the wall and he meditated all day long. He meditated for most of the night. But finally, he was furious with his brother disciple, Ganto, frustrated with all the snoring and such. And so finally, he just turned around from his meditation and he said, brother, wake up, get up and meditate. You're a monk. A monk should have mindfulness and clear comprehension as their constant companion. You're just sleeping. You're just being lazy. You're the embodiment of the hindrance of sloth and torpor. Stop it. Train. And Ganto rubbed his eyes and sat up in bed, looked at him, and said, "What are you talking about?" "I'm just doing what people do when there's a snowstorm. We can't go outside. I'm going to sleep. You're the weird one. The innkeeper has been looking at you weird. You're just sitting there all day long, like a stone statue. That's not normal. Take a nap. Eat something. Calm down." Yes, very nice exchange. Now, don't think that Ganto is just a jerk. He's not. He knew exactly what he was doing, I'm afraid. So, Seppō got down to the heart of the matter, and he said, "I can't." It would be wonderful if some of us had this level of urgency, that I can't do it. I can't lie down and sleep. There's nothing I want to do more than that, but I'm so insecure. I have such pain, and he hit his chest. I have such pain here. I don't have any sense of ease. I have such a deep insecurity. I don't know what to do about it. I've been training for all these years. This is when I've been training for, 20 years or something. I've been training for all these years and I'm still insecure. I don't know what to do about it. There's no solution. I don't know how to move forward. So I'm just going to sit. I'm going to do something. And Ganto said, "Oh, well, if that's what's going on, tell you what. You tell me what you've experienced as you've trained. And when you're talking about a real insight, I'll tell you that's a real insight. That's perfect. And if you tell me something that's a little bit off, I'll say, no, don't look at it that way. How about that? I'll help you along with your training." Even though they're brother disciples, they're just stuck in an inn. There's no one else to go to. He said, "Okay. Well, when I was with Master Yunguan, he gave a lecture on emptiness and form, that emptiness is form and form is emptiness. And when I heard him say that, I realized a true insight. I had a true realization. Now, it would be wonderful if we had that sort of thing happen here, wouldn't it? Somebody have a true realization about the nature of emptiness and form. He said it was amazing. My whole body was filled with energy. All of my faculties became bright. My body was covered in sweat with such joy and amazement and wonder. So, of course, this is an excellent realization. It would be wonderful if more people nowadays had such realizations, but Ganto was a true master. They had a different standard back then. And so he said, "Oh, that's not even worth talking about. No. You have anything else? Anything else happen while you were training?" He said, "Well, when I was with Master Tozan, I heard his poem, which I won't quote the entire thing, but the central line is, 'It is me, I'm not it.'" And he said, when I heard that, I had a true understanding of self and non-self, complete breakthrough, seeing my true nature. Now, this is even deeper than the first realization, and it would be good, again, if we had such realizations vibrant in the world today. I think some people do, but it's pretty rare. But Ganto was a true master. He wasn't going to dumb down the teaching. He understood that his brother disciple had the highest potential. And so out of great kindness, he said, "Oh, no. Forget about that. That's not the path." Did you have any experiences worth reporting? I mean, anything that you can tell me that's worth talking about? He said, "Well, when I was with Master Tokusan, our teacher, when we were training together, I asked him once, can a student understand the teacher? If a student's training with a teacher, can they really understand his teaching?" And Master Tokusan turned on me and shouted, "What did you say?" Then he hit me. And when he hit me, it was as if the bottom fell out of the bucket. So this is the point that you've trained and trained and trained, and your mind and body are completely empty. There's nothing in them whatsoever. Your awareness is totally empty, totally void, and then somehow that emptiness itself is smashed. The bottom fell out of the bucket, and there's pure and total liberation. So it's because of this complete awakening that he received transmission from Tokusan. And Ganto said, no. Now, if you see it that way, you can't even save yourself, much less anyone else. That isn't the point of the path. You have anything else? He said, no. He said, oh. Well, in that case, and then Ganto, in the way that such people can do, pulled out the perfect brilliance of awakening. He's just imagine this guy. He's just some guy in wrinkled robes, sitting in a bed, in an inn, in a snowstorm, talking to someone who's absolutely desperate. And this is what he said. That if you want to offer a great teaching, then it must burst forth from your own heart, covering the earth. And at that moment, Seppō totally realized the way. Complete awakening. The birth of one of the greatest spiritual teachers of all time. And he leapt up and he proclaimed for himself, brother, here today, I have realized the way. And he began teaching. And he very quickly became famous as one of the great masters. Why? Because he had been through everything. He had failed in every way possible. He had failed in every possible way. And so every student who came to him, he could help them. He just went into the mountains. And he found a big tree, really big tree, huge tree, that had a hole in it that was rotten, and he just went and sat in it. And then a few years later, there was an enormous monastery with 1,500 monks and 1,000 lay people. This is huge. A huge monastery. And he taught all of them. I mean, they didn't have to be there. People flocked because he could help all of them. Because he had been through everything. He was the worst failure, hopeless case. And so he dedicated himself to merit, to ethical behavior. And out of that came the ability to be of true service. Not from meditation. Not from some special state, but from dedicating himself to service and refusing to give up, even though he did actually give up many times. But then he didn't give up again. He tried again. And so this is how he taught. Again, this now. Now we're going from his training to a stage totally beyond understanding, totally beyond mental understanding. So don't listen to this trying to figure out what the words mean. Listen to it trying to understand what was actually happening at the moment of these exchanges. A student came to Master Seppō. Now he's Master Seppō. Now he's a true master. A student came to Master Seppō and asked him, what is it that you realized under Tokusan that allowed you to stop seeking? What did you understand when you were training that allowed you to stop this constant search? And he said, I went there with empty hands, and I left with empty hands. Another time, a student went to him and said, what if a student's fundamental wisdom is led astray by his teacher? What if there's a student, and because of the unskillfulness of the teacher, they lose track of their true wisdom? What is it? What happens if, as it's put, a student's fundamental I, so I meaning this kind of I that you see with, is diluted by one's teacher? And Seppō said, "You haven't realized this teaching." And so the student said, "Well then, where is my true I? Where is my I, like EYE, this kind of I? Where is my fundamental wisdom?" And Seppō said, "You won't get it from your teacher." Another time there was a monk who came, and in front of the congregation he introduced himself as, he introduced himself and they had an exchange, sort of complicated, just to skip over the rest of the story. Eventually he talked about spiritual light, a place where he had been, and he used the term spiritual light. And Master Seppō said, "Oh, interesting. In the daytime there's sunlight, and at nighttime there's firelight." So they didn't have this kind of light. Of course they had candles, so firelight. In the daytime there's sunlight, in the nighttime there's firelight. What is spiritual light? And the monk didn't have any reply, and none of the monks had any reply. And so Master Seppō had to answer the question himself. And the question was, in the daytime there's sunlight, at nighttime there's firelight. What is spiritual light? And he answered, sunlight, firelight. This is the brilliance. These are famous stories that have changed countless thousands, maybe millions of lives. We study them and we study them until we see the true wisdom, the real thing. The real thing. True awakening. Not just some clever course, but the real thing. Of course, if you can make a clever course, nothing wrong with that. But it has to lead to the real thing, or else it's a waste of our lives. We're giving our lives away to something fake that makes our lives fake, but we are not fake. We are real. We are the real thing, this real living life energy right now, brilliantly shining. We knew what needed to be done when we were 4. We knew what needed to be done when we were 10. Again and again, we've known through our lives what needed to be done. Did we give up? That's the question. Just do not give up. That's what you're here to do. You're here just to basically learn how to not give up. That's why whatever anyone asks me, I always say, keep going. That's the only advice you really need. Do not give up. What? Someone else is going to give you more than that? Just here to encourage you, to demonstrate for you that it's possible to not give up. This is the brilliance of your mind. This teaching has to burst forth from your own heart, covering the earth. You're going to ask someone else to do that for you? Who's that? You hold that aspiration. You bring it forth. In order to do this, it's essential that we have faith. It's essential that we have faith. You have to have faith in yourself. Have faith in the world. Have faith in your ability to do this, and have faith that the world is set up for you to do it. That your vow is the foundation. Your vow is the basis. Mind is chief. Have faith. Don't just assume that everything is set up against you. Too many of us, because we have dumbed down, because we have broken our vow and aren't living it, we discover that the whole world is against us. Because we're not being authentic, the real world is against you. You're living a delusional, half-hearted life. Of course the whole world is against that. Nature isn't delusional and half-hearted, but if you make yourself delusional and half-hearted, it's going to seem like the whole world is against you. But that's because of your own mind. If you throw yourself into your vow, the whole world is in perfect harmony with you. Of course it is. The world is what's asking you to perform that vow. Why would it stop you? You have to have deep faith in this. Deep faith.